Welcome to the Heavenward podcast. My name is Sam. Today we are going to be diving into my own personal journey with God in my frame of reference, the divine, universe, whatever it is that resonates for you, you get the point. It's all the same. Anyway, I feel like I always have to say that for some reason, but moving forward. So I named this podcast the Heavenward podcast because Heavenward has been a word that one time popped up while I was meditating, and it's something that always stuck with me. So it is a word that describes looking up, looking to heaven, looking to that frequency, heavenward thoughts. So when in a cycle of negativity, let's look up. Let's look at the higher perspective. Let's look to all sides of the coin here. So who is Sam? That's what this episode is going to be diving into, because I want to be credible to those of you who tune in and don't really know my background, my story, who haven't been clients of mine. Not that it really matters, but I just am somebody who likes to dot my I's and cross my T's. And I'm not even saying that I am an expert in the things I'm going to be talking about. I really have learned everything I've learned through personal experience. And this is just, I've been through a lot of different experiences in my life that have led me to working with God to heal myself. And so that's how I have assisted other people in doing the same. I am somebody who is extremely passionate about spirituality and about the art of it, the art of connection to what we are all a part of and the great beyond and God and what that is and what that means. I'm extremely passionate about mental health as well and bringing the both together. That is, I feel, a part of my huge goal in my life is bringing together the humanness of the mental, of the thoughts, of the subconscious with spirituality and with who we truly are and where we truly come from and the deeper root of what this all is and who we all are. Correlating the two is the key. That in the beginning of my journey of awareness of something greater than myself, I really didn't understand. I was somebody who struggled a lot with my mental health growing up. I started having suicidal ideations and thoughts at the age of 7 and 8. The first time I actually approached my mom and told her, not really realizing the severity at the time because I was so young, is that I was having suicidal thoughts. And that was when I was 9 that I actually told her. Went to therapy one time at that age and then was just done with it for a while. But my connection to God really did begin when I was younger. And I can remember when I was really young, I was in a home that was filled with a lot of negativity, a lot of arguing, a lot of it was just a lot. So I really internalized that, but also I felt like there was this negative energy that was constantly around me when I was a young kid. And I felt like this energy kind of followed me throughout my teen years until I really came to the awareness of God when I turned 18. Now, to this day, I don't really understand when I was younger what this negativity and this evil I felt was, but I just always felt that there was not a good, I always felt like there was a rain cloud over me. And I couldn't sleep without a TV on because I felt like I was hearing voices. I felt like I was feeling things and hearing things and seeing things I couldn't sleep in the dark. Even to this day, I cannot sleep without the TV on because it's almost like too much chatter. But at the young age that I was, this is like when I was, as far back as I can really remember, I didn't really understand. But there were also moments when I was really young that I felt an overwhelming presence that to this day, I'll randomly get this like overwhelming presence that just suddenly feels like a shade coming over me. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but it just happens very randomly. And every time I would feel it, even as a kid, I would just feel a sense of home. I never felt at home anywhere else besides when I came into this awareness of God, when I again turned 18, like I just always struggled with a sense of feeling I belong. And I was always made to feel like the outcast, no matter who I was around, in my family, with my friends. I just felt like I was never accepted. So from a young age, I started to adapt to what I started to notice people around me liked. And as I started to adapt to those behaviors, it became a part of me. And that's where my codependency, my people-pleasing tendencies stem from, because I wanted to be accepted. I wanted friends. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel like I had people who cared about me. And that's how I did it, is by, shutting down who I really am and becoming what everybody else wanted me to be. So this is where my mental health struggles really started to take a toll, is when I reached my teenage years in high school. I started drinking and dabbling with pills and weed and all that stuff. But I actually became very suicidal I was really suicidal in 9th grade. So I was around 12, 13 is when I actually started acting on my suicidal ideations. And it was almost like I had a fantasy and romance with death. Like I was very fascinated by it. I felt comforted by death. And I really just felt like that was what gave me comfort more than actually living in life, because I wasn't living authentically. My whole life was centered around making sure everybody else was comfortable, making sure I was appeasing everybody so that I didn't set anybody off or become the enemy, because I was constantly made to feel that way in my home. Now, as I started acting on my suicidal ideations, I attempted a few times in 9th grade. And basically in an argument with my mom, I came forward and told her about it. And that's when, she took me to, got me in therapy and a psychiatrist to get on medication. And that's when I became addicted to Adderall. So that's when I was on, I abused my Adderall. I loved stimulants. That was my thing. Like I really loved stimulants. So, so I was partying a lot, not using my pills correctly, and just becoming totally numb of a person. I started cutting all sorts of friends off in turn for another friend that I thought was more like me. And at the time, I just wanted to escape. I just wanted to have fun. I just wanted to party. That's all I cared about in high school. That's all I cared about. Then I had a breaking point in high school where I overdosed on all my pills and ended up in the psychiatric unit in the hospital. This was the first time I'd ever seen my parents cry. This is the first time I've ever seen them show warmth. specifically my father, show warmth toward me and really have fear over losing me. And I was just kind of like, I didn't even expect that, so that's how unloved I felt. And I was in the hospital, high as you can imagine, off these pills, and was in the unit for about a week. And when I got out of there, I felt a certain new lease on life. And throughout the course of, after that, I had many breaking points like that where I literally was like life and death. And the fact that I'm really still here is amazing to me in one piece. I have stories for days, but this is just the first one. And after that point, I continued to party, continued to numb, continued to mix pills and alcohol and all that stuff. And my senior year in high school, I actually OD'd again, but on accident. I was on certain meds, one of them being an anti-seizure medication because I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the time. And I mixed that with alcohol and had a seizure at a friend's house and passed out. And I actually had like a near-death experience that I do have a video on my YouTube about it, and I'll dive into it another time. But basically, long story short, I know I went somewhere else. My thoughts that I had in my waking life were just heightened in the experience I had in the NDE. And I just entered into a gold light. There was a being that was talking to me. I didn't know anything that occurred in that experience except for the beginning of it, which felt like literal hell. It was like a fuzzy TV screen, and it was like coming at my eyes in the vision is what it felt like, or in the experience. And then I went into the gold light. I woke up and projectile vomited like no other, just releasing everything that I had taken. And after that was like a turning point for me in regards to like that year. I stopped smoking weed in particular. I felt like that was a trigger for some reason, even though it wasn't. But that was like the least of the issues of what I was doing. But for some reason, I felt like I just needed to start like really getting myself together a little bit. I was really, really depressed that year, but I had promised myself since the last suicide attempt I would never attempt again. And I have kept that promise since. So, that year, my senior year, I moved to Florida right after graduation pretty much, because me and my mom had a very tumultuous relationship growing up. Like, we just really had issues, and it reached a breaking point where, we were both kind of like, this isn't working. Like, she felt I'd be happier away from her, and I felt the same. And so I went to live with my grandmother in Florida when I turned 18, was going to go to college and everything. Come to find out, I find out that I'm pregnant while I'm in Florida. Pregnant by somebody who I was really into, but was using me as just like a booty call type thing, and had a whole girlfriend, that popped out with a girlfriend. Yeah. So basically find out I'm pregnant, and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go home. Like, I literally stopped all my meds I was on, cold turkey, which you're never supposed to do. Stopped them all cold turkey. It almost was like a switch went off for me. And I just felt so alone because I was calling around to clinics in Florida, and I was like trying to figure out what I need to do. Like, I'm pregnant, like I'm on all these psych meds, and nobody's able to give me information. And so I was like, you know what, I got to go home. So first of all, I text the person who got me pregnant, and they deny it, all that good stuff, was not going to be involved. So I'm facing that fact, but I'm like, you know what? Like, that's okay. I'm going to do this. So I make my way home. Grandma's devastated because I just moved there. On top of that, me and my grandma this is the first time me and her actually got to sit down and talk about things, because she lived with us, when I was really young, like 1 to 3, to help out, with me, because my dad was in a band and would go on tour and stuff like that. So it was just my mom and my grandma most of the time, but they didn't get along. And so basically my grandma had told me some things about things that had happened with me and my mom growing up that I didn't know about, and also validated basically, that I had been molested by a family member, which I always knew, but didn't have the validation from somebody in my family that like they also knew. I didn't know anybody knew. So it was very much like the stick that broke the camel's back, per se, with me and my mom, because my grandma, she painted my mom in a very bad light. And so when I go home, I'm already like, I can't believe like all the stuff that just came to light for me, as well as I'm 18, gonna have a child with somebody who doesn't want to be involved. Like, this is my life currently. Go home after being exhausted, coming off all these pills. And so I just go straight to my room. My mom says absolutely nothing to me. I go to sleep. Suddenly I'm woken up a few hours later by my mom, her freaking out about me going to get a job. And I was just kind of like, I'm exhausted, like I will, but I just need to sleep. She wasn't hearing it. She was in one of her fits. And so the last thing I remember is I chucked a lamp across the room. Next thing I know, me and my mom are fighting. My sister's trying to break it up. Extremely traumatizing experience. I just felt like everything boiled up to that point, that I obviously got kicked out, and just called whoever I had, which was just my friend's boyfriend, to go to her house. And she was actually pregnant as well. So I stayed there for about a month, and I felt the most alone I've ever felt in my life. It was a point of like, I feel like I have nobody. I have absolutely nobody, because even the people I thought would be there for me, like my friend, and she had her own stuff going on, but also like just totally didn't have any concern for me, or like try and, I guess, be a good friend to me as well in the process. She just wasn't capable of that. So I had a point where, my mom wanted me to come back home, and I was against it. But then one day I was like, you know what? I can't just stay here. I have no car. I have nothing here. I don't want to be under somebody's roof who doesn't want me here. And so I was like, you know what? Let me just go back to my parents' house and try and approach things differently. Now, in the midst of me being at my friend's house and staying there, I had a miscarriage. And so I lost the pregnancy and was devastated. But at the same time, it was absolutely for the best in the long run. But I didn't understand. Like, I was like, how is all of this stuff happening to me? Like, how is just thing after thing? Like, I'm constantly being abandoned. I'm constantly being, I'm having to go through all this shit. And it's like, I've had enough. And I faced a point there at my friend's house of like, Again, the thought, for any of you who understand this, if you've ever attempted suicide, if you've ever had suicidal ideations, but actually like attempted, that option always presents itself moving forward. Whenever you're in a really tough spot or have a similar like emotion or experience come up for you, it's like I feel like it's always presented itself because it's there in my memory, So it presented itself and it was looking real good for me in the moment because of all the stuff that was going on. But I told myself, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do something different this time. And I'm going to fight for my life. I'm going to fight for my health. So I go back to my parents' house and me and my mom, I just started approaching the situation differently. I stopped reacting to her because I knew she wasn't going to change how she communicates. And I just knew that I just need to approach it differently. And so I started practicing that. And I also started running and working out. And I actually went into a bit of a psychosis during the time I went after the miscarriage because I swore that I was still pregnant for the post 6 months of after the miscarriage. I was having delusions and having like kicks in my stomach. Like it was really bad. I was really in a state of psychosis. And eventually I had a question pop into my mind. And this was after I went to the doctor and everything and told them I think I'm still pregnant. They checked and said, you're not. Like they made me feel like I was crazy. And after that point, I was like, all right, I'm really not. So I finally accepted it and was able to mourn it and really experience the healing of it. But I had this question pop into my mind one day and I was like, what if God is real? Because previously I had really disregarded God, even though God kept revealing to me, even with the near-death experience I had and even my suicide attempt. In the midst of that, like there was this overwhelming presence of love that surrounded me in those moments afterwards. And I just didn't correlate it, I wasn't there. And so once I asked that question, I promise you it was like a flood of validation. God took that opportunity and flooded me with so much validation. What really brought me to God, and I actually grew up in a Christian church and was even confirmed there, a Lutheran church. And also and that never stuck with me. It just never did anything for me. And so I started watching The Long Island Medium. The Long Island Medium is who really validated for me that God is real. Like, how is she doing this? How is she healing people this way? How does she know these things? And it's so crazy because that shows what led me to God, but also I'm now a medium. So it's just so interesting how my path has revealed itself over time. And basically, I sought a medium around me because I just wanted a personal reading and to just hear what God personally has to say to me. And I did find a guide, a spiritual guide, a medium that ended up being my mentor for a long time. She was my mentor for, I think 6 to 7 years. And in the beginning, she was mainly my coach for the bad relationship I was in for 5 years, up until I was 24, 25. I would just go to her every time we fought and all that, and she would help me through it, help me calm down. But eventually, she's the one who actually taught me how to use my healing abilities. And she also is the one I would go to when my mediumship and psychic abilities started increasing a lot. it was like night and day one day. And I was freaking out. I was scared. I didn't leave my house for a few weeks when my gifts started occurring when I was 26. And so she was somebody who I could go to who would help me to understand what was going on. And so this all began my journey where I was like having an actual active relationship with God. I was acknowledging God. I was approaching God. I was praying. I was active in my discipline with God. Now, in the beginning, it felt like butterflies. It felt like this newfound, like I felt like I had new eyes. I felt like a light went on in a room of darkness, and I suddenly can see everything in the room that I didn't even know was there. That's how it felt for me when I was 18 and had this experience of like going to the medium and God just kind of showing up for me. Like one day at work, I found like an angel coin just sitting there on the bar. Like nobody was around, and just an angel coin that I happened to find. And in the midst of this time, I was still mourning the loss of the miscarriage, and like that loss was so heavy for me. And so this all helped me to really heal that, and it just brought the awareness to me that I want more for my life than I previously did. I previously didn't care about my life, didn't think I'd make it past 21, was even told by psychiatrists and psychologists that I wouldn't live past 21. They literally told my parents I would probably commit suicide and not make it past 21. So this was what was put in my mind, validating my lack of will to live. But me asking one simple question, opening myself up to one simple question of what if God is real? Floodgates open. Like that one question brought me to where I am today. And the consistency with asking questions. That is probably one of the biggest messages and biggest things I've learned is it's not about what you know. It's not about what you can tell people, but it's about you yourself asking God these questions, having that open dialogue with God. You are allowed to question God in a sense of being open to what the answer actually is. And sometimes, a lot of the times, it's not what we think. So I've spent a lot of time asking a lot of questions. Specifically, after that spiritual awakening for me, when I turned 26, I had another major spiritual awakening after the breakup of my 5-year relationship. And in that relationship, I actually had an abortion a few months before our relationship ended, because he was very mentally abusive and harassing me and like just trying to manipulate me into aborting the child because he didn't want it. But I would have had it if it wasn't for the harassment I was getting. I was in a really dark place, super sick. And I was like, I didn't tell anybody because I was so ashamed of myself, and had an abortion at the age of 24. So after that, I had more healing to do, of course, with just healing that shame. And after that period of like finally being free from that relationship and all the shame that came with it, realizing how manipulated I had been, I just realized I never want to give my power away like that again. And instead, I took my power back and started opening myself up to newer possibilities and reconnected with God. And the thing about that relationship was he grew up in the church and was very, quote unquote, godly, quoting the Bible all the time type person. And, I'm not knocking religion. I'm not knocking the Bible. I'm really not, because the Bible has a lot of juice to it. You know what I'm saying? It's just not interpreted all the time the way it should be. It's not used correctly a lot of the time. But this type of person just put a lot of shame in my heart and brought a lot of shame that I already had in me out. And so he really made me distance myself from God being in that relationship, because he made me feel like God was one thing when I felt like God was another. he made me feel like God was somebody who would condemn me for my feelings toward women, because I confided in him about how I was having feelings toward women. He was the only person I really felt I could tell. And he told me it was the devil and that God would condemn me. I would go to hell. Versus, but you tell me to get an abortion, but that's not something that God would condemn me for. You see what I'm saying? So it was very hypocritical. But I wasn't strong enough in my relationship with God as much as I thought I had been. And so after that relationship, I came out as gay in the middle of the summer type thing, very nonchalantly, and started dating women and had a lot of shame with that. And that's actually why I didn't come out a lot sooner. Had a lot of shame with that. And also started coming into my spiritual abilities. I started having prophetic dreams all of a sudden. I started experiencing feelings and knowings about certain people around me and just different energies. I just knew certain things. I didn't know how I knew them. And it just became so intense. I was feeling and channeling spirits and angels and my ancestors. And these things were constantly being validated for me. So it was like, I knew this was happening. I had a coach that was also guiding me through this transition. And in that transition, I had so much shame because I was taught that, these abilities are not of God. So me, myself having them versus me going to somebody who has them, realizing that I also have them, it was such a hard thing to swallow for me, because I was like, well, what does this mean? Like, is this something God approves of? And same with me dating women. Like, is me marrying a woman or being with a woman, is this something that God is going to condemn me for? Like, because God's opinion, what God thought of me was most important. And I valued it so much at that time. And I remember being at work and going into the bathroom and just bawling my eyes out, like talking to God, like asking once again a question. I just asked God a question. I didn't assume. I didn't, I took my shame to God and I said, God, is this of you? Like, do you approve of all of this that's coming up in me? And what I felt and heard was, it's the same as, or what he said. God said, I'm sorry, it was so long ago. I came to him. Oh yeah, that's right. I came to God because I was talking to God about specifically me being gay. And God was like, well, it's the same when it comes to your spiritual gifts. Like, you're using them for good. It's something that you're not really choosing for yourself. It's like, it just is. And I love you no matter what. I gave that to you. So after that point, I really started accepting more and more my gifts because I was using them for good. And also the fact that I am gay, and accepting that because I couldn't choose it. It wasn't something I chose. It literally was something that just came forth, and I couldn't deny it anymore. So that was my second spiritual awakening. That's actually when I got into tarot, is in order to kind of like fine tune my gifts and to really, that's all tarot is. Tarot are just cards with pictures, meanings that most intuitive readers don't even use for the meanings. It really is just to help you to stay tuned in, almost like playing with a fidget toy to focus, like something like that. Like, it's literally the same thing. So I started diving into tarot, and that year I felt this huge pull to move to Florida again. And what's so crazy, it was in 2020 that I actually moved. I was putting it off to move and pick my date that I'm moving. So I picked, finally, I was like, all right, this overwhelming feeling is not going away. I need to move. I picked March 16th, 2020 to move to Florida. The day after I move is when the world shuts down because of COVID. So if I had picked even a few days later, I wouldn't have been able to move. When I moved to Florida, I was by myself. I live with my grandma again. And, I just really just became so attuned to the divine, to God, and was really just getting comfortable with my gifts and getting comfortable with my connection to God with these gifts. And also started making YouTube videos, with channel messages. And that's where it really started with me doing readings and giving messages and also healings. I also did a lot of shadow work and healing myself through that time of just my childhood and old experiences and memories that I haven't had time to process, because I finally am in a space where I'm safe, and I'm finally in a space where I have, no distractions, no more partying, no more drinking. I'm by myself. I know nobody. It's just me. And so I really started changing a lot at this time. And this is really where everything kind of began. So that year and moving forward is what really kind of kickstarted my spiritual practice in helping others with their gifts, and also just helping other people heal. And that's what my intention is. My intention is really to help those kind of bring together the mental with the spiritual. And so this is how this all began. And I know this was very heavy of a episode, but I do want to give a bit of a well-rounded approach to my journey so that you guys understand where I'm coming from. I gave the very short story of a lot of the things I talked about today. And there's a lot of lessons I've learned along the way that I'll be touching on later on in especially mastering emotions. I really do want to dive into that in the next episode, because I have a lot of experiences that have taught me how to not be pulled out of myself because of somebody else's emotions, because I grew up in an environment where it was very unsafe to, I never knew when somebody was going to start going off. I just never knew when something was I was walking on eggshells my whole life. So I just really learned how to kind of regulate myself and find peace within myself, so that no matter what is happening around me, I have my peace. I'm not allowing it to infiltrate me. And so I'm really going to dive into that moving forward. But this is going to be episode 1. So thank you if you listened up until this point. Thank you for listening and holding space for me while I shared my story with you of how I have reached the point that I'm at now of being a spiritual guide and a medium, and my journey with God. It's very personal to my heart. It's something that is not easy for me to talk about, but I am somebody that realized what have I gone through all these experiences for if I don't give glory to God for getting me through them? And to help you guys to also see the higher perspective in your own painful experiences and see how every experience really does lead you to where you're meant to be. Divine detours, right? So thank you so much, and I will see you guys in the next episode.